Hey everybody, welcome back to Miles and Mentors. We have a great episode for you today with special guest Steve Saltzgiver from RTA, the Fleet Success Company. We're going to learn all about his path through the industry, what he's lived and learned along the way, and pass that information on to you. So stick with us. We have a great episode lined up for you right after this on Miles and Mentors.
Welcome to Miles and Mentors, the podcast that humanizes trucking, getting real-life advice and insights from logistics professionals from all over the industry. We sit down with those seasoned mentors who have put in the miles with a mission to pass on the knowledge gained from years in the industry to you. Now buckle up and enjoy the show.
Hey, what's going on, Steve? Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Excited to be here.
Definitely. So just from a high level, for those that may not be familiar with who you are you and what's kind of your role in the industry today?
Okay, well, I guess your title describes you the best. I'm a mentor now.
That's right.
I've been in this industry, I hate to say it, almost 50 years.
Nice.
I started out right out of high school, started building trucks, worked on an assembly line, became a mechanic, journeyman diesel mechanic. From there, I became a supervisor, and then a manager, a director, a group director, and a vice president. And now I'm into consulting. So that's kind of what I do for a living now.
Fabulous. Well, if we can, I would love to go back to kind of the very beginning with you. I mean, as you talked about, you've got almost 50 years in the industry and you've had all these positions from, hands-on roles to leadership, consulting. Can you tell us what initially drew you to this industry in the first place and what's kind of kept you motivated over the years?
I don't know exactly what drew me here. I'm probably like anybody else that gets in fleet. We just kind of land here, and then realize a few years later that we're in fleet management and transportation. Although I will tell you, I did have an epiphany once in my life. I've been actually in fleet management for probably 15 years. And I was sitting in the state of Utah, and I got this anonymous package in a manila envelope, and I thought, oh my gosh, hopefully this is not a bomb or anything, right? Long story short, I opened it up, and it was a VHS tape, and I stuck it in the recorder, and it was a bunch of home movies that my mother anonymously sent me, with me running around as a 2-year-old in a diaper with a little blankie over my shoulder, bending down, lining up cars and trucks.
That's awesome.
And so at that moment in time, I thought, wow, I've been here a long time, and I never knew my this was like karma, right?
Right.
And so that kind of made me to really think about what I was doing, and I had been successful up to that point, but I think from that point forward, I really became more ingrained and more purposeful, because I thought, well, maybe this was karma, and maybe this was fate somehow. So that's really where I started.
So kind of looking back over your career, what's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were just getting started out?
Oh, tough question. I think probably the thing I've learned the most is how to leverage people, how to leverage their experiences. Early on, sometimes you have a tendency not to ask the right questions or seek the right advice.
Sure.
So I think if I were to talk to someone that's entering the business, that's what I would tell them is, look for mentors somewhere and leverage their vast experiences. I know I enjoy now. That's one of the things I enjoy the most is actually giving back to this industry.
Right.
Because I've learned so much along the way. And, and I have had a lot of good mentors and a lot of good networking opportunities. The other thing I'd say too is, join some of those professional associations where you can rub shoulders with people like that.
Sure.
Because they do have a wealth of knowledge that you can't typically get on AI or the internet or something like that. Right.
Right. Now, when you first got started out, I know you say you just kind of landed in this career field. Did you have impact with mentorship and networking early on that was impactful to you?
Yeah, I would say so. A lot of it I had to seek out.
Sure.
But when I've sort of grew up under the vein of, if I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I remember instances where my first job as a fleet manager for a city, I had a guy throw me the keys to a backhoe, and I thought, I've never operated a backhoe. Well, I'll go figure it out. So I
We're
figured
going
it
to
out.
learn today.
As a diesel mechanic, a guy said, "Hey, weld this on," and I never was a welder. I just figured it out. Right? That's kind of the mentality we had back in those days.
Yeah,
I look back now and I think, wow, I hope that was safe what I did, So, but that was kind of my thing. I had a lot of good bosses, and frankly, I had a lot of bad bosses. But you
sure.
can learn as much from the bad ones as you can the good ones.
That's a
So,
fair point.
yeah.
That's a fair point. It's an interesting thing to think about because we never, I don't think many of us think about that in the time. You just think about the negative of it. But looking back, you can always see how situations have shaped or, altered your path in one way or another. You learn from it.
I actually had a bad boss that propelled my career, and at the time I didn't know it. I was
Really?
actually working for a transit organization. I'd been there 15 years,
Okay.
and I was kind of moving up through the career ladder. And this guy, I was going to college to get my business degree, and this guy was just making my life a living hell. So I finally just up and quit one day. 5 kids, a wife, car payments, house payments, and I just
Wow.
left. And it was a scary thought, scary move. I thought my wife was going to shoot me when I got home and told her I left there. But and we went through some trials, for about 6 months to a year until I landed somewhere else.
Yeah.
But the long story short on this was two things I learned. One is I ended up later on becoming the director of fleet operations for the state of Utah. And that was probably about 5 or 6 years into that role. This guy that was making my life miserable called me out of the blue one day and asked me for a job. And I thought, how can a guy do something like that, right? But I figured out, you know what? He didn't know he was doing that to me. And so it
Interesting.
really taught me a valuable lesson, that I probably at the time should have sat down with him, talked to him, and maybe raised that conversation. We ended up on good terms after that, but it was really kind of an eye opener for me. The other thing, I guess, that was an eye opener is, karma does come back sometimes. So,
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's awesome. So, what's that transition been like for you? I mean, obviously, you've gone through this long career, much learning, and now you're in this space that, like you said, you're able to give back. You're the mentor now. You're able to pass that information on and mold those starting their careers. How's that transition been for you, and how's it impacted you?
it's actually been very fulfilling, very satisfying. I really, if I ever enjoy anything about the aspect of my role now, it is actually giving back to people, especially younger people learning the business.
Yeah,
There's been so many changes in the transportation industry in the last 20 years, and it's only getting more complex and more crazy as we go along. And with driver shortages, mechanic shortages, and we have a lot of people now my age and a little bit older than me that are leaving the industry. So a lot of that knowledge is leaving with us, and so and that's just unrecoverable for the most part. So that's why I
yeah,
think you need to give back that institutional knowledge. So that part has been kind of satisfying to me, is to help younger people, probably more so than when I didn't really have that many people helping me, a few here and there, but so I really try to focus on that now. And I do a number of podcasts, webinars, write a lot of blogs, articles, you know, currently do consulting. And that's really the ultimate giving back, is writing reports and sitting down one-on-one with people and sharing what best practices have worked, what continue to work, and how they can implement that in their organization.
I love that. That's fantastic. So, obviously, one of the key demographics of our show is those guys just getting into the industry with that ambition to turn it into a career and looking at that long-term path. And that's why we try to get guys on like you that are mentors in the industry. We can tap into that lived and learned knowledge. But, if there was only somebody we could have on the show that just like, wrote the playbook on fleet success, it would be the dream. Wait, I think you wrote the playbook on fleet success, right?
Yeah, I did, and I can't take all the credit. There was 3 of us that wrote that together at RTA. My side of it was really the kind of the risk management and the resource efficiency area, because I've always managed shops and managed assets and things like that. But what really drew me to my current role at RTA is that we had a CEO that really focused on intentional culture. And
Okay.
that's something that I've always done. It was always kind of the golden rule of the cultures, right? If you treat people well, they'll treat you well, and you'll be a team and you work together. And that's really what we focus on here at RTA. And that was one of the pillars of our fleet success book. The 4 pillars are stakeholder satisfaction. So if you're serving customers, if you're serving people, they got to be satisfied, and that's to your success.
Right.
Intentional culture, treating people like you want to be treated, essentially. Resource efficiency, that means you only got so much time and money. And so you got to make the best use of your time and money. And then lastly, risk management, because nothing comes without a risk, right? I mean, especially in the transportation industry. So that's kind of where we geared it towards those 4 pillars. And we've had really good success with it. We give that book away free. We don't charge for that. So if anybody on your podcast wants it, they're welcome to contact us and we'll send it to them.
That's fantastic. I mean, I know you throw fleet on there, but listening to it sounds like that could really be the playbook to life. I mean, those are some excellent pillars.
Yeah, it really does fit all situations. It was funny when we came up with the pillars, because I kept thinking, a long-time transportation guy, are these really the right buckets, right?
Sure.
And as you go through that and you start saying, okay, let's add this, and let's add that, and let's see if this fits here. And it really turned out to be the right buckets. And I was always amazed by that. So
I love that. So for somebody getting started in and growing their business, what would you say is kind of the best way for someone to start implementing those pillars into their organization?
I would say the first thing you need to do, and I'm a big advocate of this, wherever you go, whatever you start, put together a plan. I've always said, if you fail to plan, you're going to plan to fail. That's just the way life is. And so everywhere I've ever been, and I've made several stops, I think I've turned around half a dozen fleets by now in my career. And every one of those started with some type of plan. And what I did is I would go in and I would say nothing for a while. I would just kind of observe, walk around, see what's going on, maybe chat with a couple of people here and there, get their feedback. And by the time I did that for a couple of weeks, I'd have a pretty good lay of the land and understand what's going on that needs to be repaired or corrected. And then I would develop a plan, and I'd have maybe key on maybe three metrics that I wanted to improve to move the organization forward.
Yeah.
And that's what I would start with. And then, of course, along the way, you got to make adjustments, and then you track it and get your team rallied around you, and hopefully take them through that successful plan that you've created.
Yeah. I think it's important to definitely have a plan. I think so many people jump in without maybe just having kind of a mental idea, but not really a written plan. And then to update that plan, because, life's messy and it changes as you go. I was listening to, not fleet related, but same message related, listened to a guy online the other day, Presley Swaggerty, I think his name was, and got listening to his book, and kind of along those same lines. He was, talking about, if you really want to be successful in something, it's been statistically proven, you need to write it down. You need to have that plan and stick to it, where like the statistics show you are going to veer course. And it makes me think, and all the different stuff I've done, I may make a plan and be super strict about it and it's perfect, but as life goes and it adjusts a little bit, I don't adjust my plan. And then I start being in the mental space, and it just goes to show so much. If you have that written down and you're able to stick to it. And I think that's a lot where, mentors and coaches and stuff can really be that valuable third party to kind of have that disconnected view and course correct you in a certain way. But
I actually have an interesting sideline that ties in exactly what you said. When I was 25 years old, I was a young father with basically 5 kids at that time. Got married really young. And I had wrote down on the back of a notebook that I would have a master's degree by the time I was 45.
There you go.
Well, with life crashing around me and going here and there and taking one semester at a time every other year, things like that, that was like next to impossible, right? Sure. Well, I found that piece of that notebook about a month before I graduated with a master's degree, and I happened to be just coming up on my 45th birthday.
I love that.
So, I mean, you literally create a mind map if you do write it down. And it just shocked me. I couldn't believe that happened.
Well, I think it's interesting by writing it down and having that goal. I mean, you make it physical, right? Like to a level, it becomes subconscious. And it may not be on your mind, but it's on your mind at the
Yeah,
same time.
I totally agree. It blew me away.
I love that. So, of those four pillars, is there one that you believe is particularly vital to achieving fleet success, and why?
If I were to hone in on one of them, I would say probably intentional culture would be your most important.
Mm,
But the reason I would say that is because a lot of people don't home in on that one. You know, they forget about the value of human beings and what they contribute and how
yeah,
you motivate people and what they're really doing. I mean, all of us spend a third of our time or more at work, you know, and so we have to do something to leverage that information. You know, you can't be miserable going to work. So we try to create a good culture where people are delighted to be at work, are excited to be at work, and they love participating and being part of a team. You know, and that doesn't always, you know, sometimes that's messy. Sometimes it's difficult.
sure.
Sometimes we call telling people the truth, right? We have to tell them the truth, and sometimes the truth is hard to hear. But I mean, I've literally had people in my career, and this is how our company works now, where you give them the truth, and they end up leaving the company, but you part friends, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's all about being honest and genuine, and as you're doing that, you help them get to that next level in their career. You don't just let them out the door because they were maybe a failure at your company, because they can be successful somewhere else. So you help them write their resume, you help them get leads, you help them get to that next level where they can be successful.
I love it, man. I'm right back to the spot though of yeah, we're slapping the term fleet on this, but I think this is ultimately life advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it kind of makes me think back where you're talking about, that boss that kind of propelled you and how that conversation didn't happen and then eventually it did. It's like, how often in life do we avoid those situations that, could be one of those that the other person just didn't even know there was an issue, or it just needs to course correct. And, it's never going to get back on track unless you have those conversations, which, sometimes are uncomfortable, but it's just part of the journey.
Yeah, we're huge Lencioni advocates about intentional culture. You know, Patrick Lencioni, the author, great author. We believe in having one-on-one conversations routinely and regularly. We believe in having goals. We call them OKRs, objectives and key results. And we sit down with people, we hold people accountable, and we have those conversations. If we're not moving the needle, we're asking why. And if
Yeah.
they need help, we help them, and so that's really what it's all about, is just working together as a team and getting to that successful level together.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And it's kind of making me think of the drivers in the industry because, I guess in general today, in today's world, is we're way more technology embraced than we ever have been before. There can be a lonely factor to that, even though we're plugged in 24/7, it can be rather lonely. At the same time, you've got drivers that spend the bulk of their time alone on the road. What would be some advice that you could say that they can implement that culture and still get plugged in, or at least, put in the effort to get plugged in, even when they're in an isolated situation?
I'm an advocate of continuous learning, and so if I'm ever by myself, I'm actually probably an odd duck that way. I like to be by myself sometimes.
Sure.
I get up every morning and go out for a drive and just think and contemplate. And so I would always say, be learning. There's so many things now, podcasts, online learning, even AI now is a great learning tool, reading books. If you were to look at my office, you'd see so many books. I read constantly. I'm an avid reader, have been, even when I was early, I told you about the backhoe, I mean, it threw me the keys. I pulled out a manual that I read before I actually operated the backhoe. So, I mean, I am constantly learning something.
Yeah.
So if I was a driver, that's what I would put my time on, because you need to occupy your mind and keep your mind active. And it doesn't always have to be about work. I mean, I'm one of those that does a Wordle every day, the New York Times Wordle, just to keep my mind going and thinking.
Sure.
And, look for those kind of things that stimulate your thought processes.
So, as someone that's been in the industry for many years now, as a seasoned professional like you are, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing the logistics industry, and how have these challenges evolved in recent years?
I've always said this. I wrote a blog years ago as a consultant, probably 10 years now back, but we were calling this the perfect storm. And what the perfect storm really entailed was it's the intersection between complexity and technology and the loss of institutional knowledge.
Mm,
Those two things are converging together at the same time, and that's really a bad combination.
yeah.
So that's something that's really been on my mind a lot, especially the technology and complexity side. I mean, you've got vehicles now that are not as reliable as they used to be because technology breaks. You've got a lot of fleet vehicles where they're being recalled for things because their electronics are not working right.
Yeah.
So it's been a real challenge for people to keep their fleet vehicles on the road. So that's what I would tell people is, get more averse to that type of technology that's coming out, learn about it, give feedback to those that are putting it out. Now, the flip side of that, there's also a lot of good technology that's keeping us, safe on the road.
Yeah.
And, I'm the first to admit, 2012, I was in a head-on collision. Airbag saved my life.
Mm,
So, things like that are absolutely a necessity, on the market.
sure.
So that's the only thing I would say, is just keep learning, keep finding those things, and use them to your benefit.
Now, this one's a little bit of a personal opinion nature. Going through your experience up to this point, everything you've dealt with, considering the logistics industry as a whole, if we could give you a magic wand, you could fix anything the way you wanted it, what would you do?
Wow, that's a loaded question. um, I think it comes back to people, I guess.
Yeah.
Making sure that people are being taken care of, making sure that we treat people like we need to. We move the industry forward. Um, that's why I'm such an advocate of the intentional culture for that reason,
Sure.
because ultimately that reduces turnover, and turnover is a huge issue, especially in trucking. If you look
Yep.
around trucking, it's like 99% turnover, and that's a metric you really need to think about tracking to keep people. And that usually comes down to satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
And money. So I guess that's what I would say is, treat your people right, make them part of your team. Um, and there's so many things that go there variable wise, but I think that's the most important thing is that's your most important asset is your people.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's fantastic advice. Now, we had touched in a little bit on like technology. You had mentioned with, airbags coming out and ended up saving your life. That's huge. With fleet management, we've seen some significant advancements in technology, and just kind of thinking over, let's say the next 5, 10 years, what do you see coming out technologically that's going to kind of impact the industry?
Interesting. I actually just did a podcast this morning.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I was talking about, and just gave people a little bit of a peek, but I mean, you got the Elon Musk robots coming out, right?
Right.
That could be a huge impact for. They already have robots that are doing mechanic work, especially repetitive and routine work. They're doing inspections, things like that. You've got parts mover kinds of robots that are moving parts around shops. You have a lot of diagnostic robot things. So, robotics, I think, is going to be a big part. And along that same vein, I think, we talk about autonomous vehicles at some
Yeah.
point in time. That's going to be huge. We're already using some in trucking. We're already using some, and we're using platooning and some other things, So I think a lot of that stuff is going to offset the driver and the mechanic shortages that we're being impacted by right now. Um, but I would say at some point in time, I don't think that's the end all to be all. I think we're going to have to get more people in this industry,
Mm,
and that's going to start at levels maybe in elementary school where we introduce, the power of this industry. The number one vocation in the United States is a driver,
yeah.
and we're short drivers. So that says something, right? That means we're not starting early enough to get people into this business. So that's something we as mentors or podcasters or whatever, we can start reaching down and bringing people up into this business.
I love that. For those that are looking to get into that career field, into logistics, into trucking, what do you think are some of the crucial skills and mindset aspects for them to have as they're starting their journey?
Um, one of the things I think that's lacking now is a lot of the perfunctory skills. In other words, how does a truck work?
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't being taught that. When I was young, um, we actually had shop classes in high school that I took to become a mechanic, and we actually had hands-on experience. I remember in the backyard, my dad had asked me to hand him a wrench so he fixed the car. So we're missing a lot of that perfunctory stuff that used to be there. So that's something I think we're going to have to bring back. It's probably going to take more apprenticeship programs, more unions, more governments are going to have to get together and start partnering to do that. And that's really bringing back what we used to have. That's not something that's brand new, but I
Yeah.
think that's going to be key. I see a lot of fleet managers coming into the business now and transportation executives. They have no idea how a truck even works. They don't know what an engine looks like. They don't know what a starter motor is, and it's really hard to make intelligent decisions, especially when it comes to cost. If you don't know how much what a starter is, how do you know how much it costs, and those kinds of things. So there's going to have to be some type of education that goes along that way. So I think that's probably what needs to come back.
I fully agree. I'm one of those nerdy guys that, I'm kind of like you. I'll figure something out, right? But at the same time, if I realize that I don't understand something, it just grinds at my brain. I hate not having at least a basic understanding of the principle. Like I get we're never going to understand every single step or code or whatever behind things, but it's interesting to see today how far we've come over the even the last few decades in technology, and so many of us are just like, this does this. Okay, but how? I don't know. It's like, well, if you're ever going to get to a point of trying to improve or, fix, you've got to have a basic understanding of the principle of how or why it does what it does.
Yep, I agree. That's why I've always been an avid reader, an educator.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's fantastic, I mean, it goes to show too, like you're doing podcasting, this show, so many other resources out there. Even now, we've talked on a couple episodes about the influx of TikTok in trucking and the logistics, especially since COVID. And what it really boils down to is just the opportunity for so much micro learning. I mean, there's so much information out there, and mentors of all different levels, right? But somebody that's been through a situation or understands a situation that you might not, that's invaluable to be able to just absorb that.
oh yeah, I love that. I mean, if I want to change the filter in my furnace and I don't know how, I just go on TikTok or YouTube and figure it out, right? I mean, the wealth of information that's out. I mean, just about everything you can think of is out there.
Yeah.
So I think we live in a great time. I think that's something people need to really spend a little more time in. How things work, and that will propel your career, I believe.
100%. Now, with growing and expanding a business within, fleet management, is there a way to future proof that in any way, any precautions that you can take to kind of anticipate for the changes coming and to keep your business sustainable?
Well, I think probably government regulations is one you got to stay abreast on, because
Yeah.
those change. You've got a lot of things going on in the electric arena right now, so you need to be up on all that, whatever government regulations there is. And a lot of it's by industry segment that you're in. I mean, if you're in a school bus industry, you obviously got to stay abreast of that regulatory information. If you're in the trucking industry, you've got to stay abreast of that. So it depends on where you're exactly staying. Other things, technology, as I mentioned earlier, continues to evolve almost on minute by minute level.
Yeah.
So and then I would say just embrace all those changes. I think probably where someone can really be detrimental to their career is not embracing change. because it's inevitable and it's going to happen, and you might as well learn how to do it.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's going to be interesting to see just how that plays out, especially in this industry, over the next decade, couple decades. I mean, we look at the impact worldwide right now with all this AI and everything, and even how just since it, released to the public during COVID time to now, we've seen it double and triple itself so many times. To be able to kind of put that into how we go about our operations efficiency wise and stuff, and to be able to look to a machine and be like, hey, how can I do this better? Because I mean, ultimately that's how AI is improving, right? It's being able to look at what everyone's done and say, how can we improve this that much quicker? I think that's going to play an amazing role into the business aspect, but it'll be really interesting to see what that looks like and how it's regulated, especially throughout an industry like logistics that is so heavily regulated.
It's so funny. I use AI probably every single day now.
Yeah.
I'm a big Chat GPT fan and Microsoft Copilot fan, but you have to know what questions you're asking it. You have to know about the topic that you're inquiring about. You can't just take it at face value because it's an input still. It's like you're dealing with an input. I use this little. I had an argument with AI, probably a couple months ago now, about vehicle maintenance reporting standards. And if you're in trucking, you'll understand what VRMS codes are. But that's how we decide how to maintain vehicles.
Sure.
And it kept giving me the bogus information. I kept telling that's not right. Where are you getting this from? And it would give me sources, and I'm going, that's absolutely crazy, because I've been doing VRMS codes since 1980. So I've been around for a while. So, but if you were a dilettante in this business and you didn't know anything about VRMS codes and you took those at face value, you could really look silly. And so that's what I would tell people is it's a great tool, but you got to know what you're doing. And as it learns about you, which is interesting and scary at the same time, it knows how to respond to me now. That's the scary part.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then you think about, mixing that with the Tesla robots that are coming out and just, I mean, putting it all together. But that is a solid point, especially for, anyone trying to elevate and grow their business, because tools like that are amazing and can really, really move the needle. But you've got to fact check. You've got to be able to, double check and just use common sense as well. Because I've ran into that same stuff, and I think they refer to it as like AI hallucinations. But it's almost, it's not even almost. It is a little scary about how it will come up with the fabricated information and just lie to its deathbed to defend itself. And it's like
it literally is like a little child trying to get something past you. It's incredible.
Now, we've mentioned it a couple times, but I want to hone in on your podcast and learn a little bit more about that. What kind of stuff do you discuss, and when can we find that?
We have a podcast called the Fleet Success Show. There's a number of us that do it in our organization, and you can really find that on any podcast platform. It's on Apple, it's on Google, it's on Spotify. And so it's just out there. You just type in the name, the Fleet Success Pod Show or Fleet Success Show. What that is essentially is we take on a lot of topics like you are here today. And we talk about, maintaining vehicles. We talk about culture. We try and put them in the different segments of our pillars. And we, it might be about implementing electric vehicles. It might be about having a fully operational shop, might be about benchmarking and metrics. So I think we're, 160 of those now, maybe. I might be wrong, but there's a lot of those podcasts. We've been doing it for the last 4 years or so. Fantastic. So we've got a number out there. So it's a good learning tool if you're looking to get into fleet and you want to do a topic, or, like one recently we did was on right sizing your fleet. Go out there and you can find the one you want and get some tips on how to do it.
That is fantastic. And I mean, just honestly, thank you guys for everything you're doing for the industry with that, because as we've touched on kind of that mentor aspect, the micro learning aspect, the, coaching aspect, it's amazing. And it's one of the beautiful things about technology and today, because in years past, it's always kind of a struggle to find that right coach, to learn from the right person. And now with these capabilities, so many people have access to you and others in the trade that have that knowledge to learn from at a moment's notice from the comfort of their phone. Like, so amazing to be able to take advantage of that, and how impactful all that. I mean, you're talking 4 years worth of content in there, and industry insights, like how that could impact somebody's career.
Absolutely.
Well, man, I really, really appreciate you coming on today and letting us tap into your experience and what you've learned through your time in the industry. Anything major you can think that we've skipped over worth mentioning?
Not really. I think you had a good wide berth of where we're at here, but I would just, if I could leave anything with people, just be happy where you are,
Yeah.
and enjoy what you're doing. And I mean, that's really the success to life.
Man, I've loved everything you say today, and I'd love to get you back on in the future, because you're another one of those mentors that I think I could be on here for 6 hours with, and still just tap the very core of it. So we'd love
I'd
to
love to. So let me know
yeah,
anytime.
fantastic. Before we let you go, I want to give you a chance to throw in some shameless plugs. How can people find out about you and get in touch with you and your business?
Well, you can you can Google rtafleet.com. RTA stands for Ron Turley Associate, and we are a fleet management company. Essentially, we do fleet management software that tracks vehicles and in trucking and government, wherever you're at. And then we also have another business on the other side of the wall, which is the consulting side, where we work with different fleets, and we do consulting and we teach them how to do things better. So
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure to get all that linked in the notes below as well. But
okay.
again, thank you so much for taking some time out to sit with us today and letting us pick your brain.
You're welcome. Been a pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching. And until next time, stay safe out there. Have a great day.